Hello, friends. My name is David Anthony, and I'm here with Conrad Askland, who wrote book, music, and lyrics, as well as doing all of the orchestrations for Witches, a musical set in 1692 during the Salem Witch Trials. Hello, Conrad.
Hey, David. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. So, Witches was your very first full-length musical, correct?
It was my first full-length musical in 2012. My second full-length musical was Pan in 2013. Romeo and Juliet in 2015, and in 2019, my fourth original musical was Pray the Gay Away.
So, what inspired you to write Witches?
I was living in China working with Cirque du Soleil, and as a music director for one of their shows, and the show was finally fairly stable on its feet, and I thought, wow, I need something creative to work on. So I started working on an idea for a musical. That idea didn't pan out for a variety of reasons. And so I thought, what's a topic I can find that uses children? And of course, I went through a lot of the public domain type stories and ended up, it took a while, but thought, oh, the Circle Girls of the Salem Witch Trials. That's something that interests me.
So how long did it take you, and where did you find the time to write it? As you're saying, you were working full-time on a show. Were you able to just focus on the writing, or were you doing something else at the time?
Well, I started it in 2010, and I said I was working on it, but the truth of the matter is that, there was no ticking clock to finish it. So I was really just piddling in it. I guess partly so I could tell people, oh, I'm working on a music project. When that show closed, the Cirque du Soleil show closed in 2012, I came back to the States, realized, wow, I have this 9-month window to do something. I need to finish writing this and put it on stage. So then it was a mad, furious effort for 6 months, round the clock, like 12 hours a day,
Wow.
to really scramble and finish it up.
So what was the biggest challenge in writing the show?
I bit off a little more than I could chew. My first project out of the gate to create an original story. So I would say the book, the script part of it, was very challenging for me.
So I hear that while you were researching Witches, as you mentioned, you were living in China at the time, and I believe you made some sort of shocking discovery in a bar in China. Is that something you want to talk about?
So I was at a bar in China. I said, I'm working on a project. I'm just interested. What would it take for you to murder another girl or to murder a girl? And the shock of my life, they didn't even flinch. They turned to me and said, well, if they said something bad about me. And I was like, oh my God. Because there's some things of the human condition that I think don't change over the centuries, right? Love, hate, jealousy, these things. And so it was kind of in the back of my mind, could that be enough for someone to put the murder just that they said something bad? That was very shocking to me.
Yeah, I'd like to think the bar is set a little higher than that.
I would hope so. I would hope so.
Then what genre of musical theater is Witches? Is it a rock musical? Is it a classical opera? Like where does it sit?
One of the things I did with Witches is I decided that each song would be kind of in its own genre. So it really is a mix. There is opera in there, kind of like Giancarlo Menotti. I'm All in the Night Visitors. There's a piece called Invisible Worlds. It's kind of like that. There's some hip hop. There's some straight ahead, what you would consider contemporary musical theater in it, and some classical music as well. So I'm not sure because it jumps around so much. I don't think there's one genre. In general, I think it has a contemporary feel, but not contemporary like Book of Mormon or something like that.
But would you say the shifts in genre are subtle, or are they more like, say, Joseph, which is very obviously a series of very different styles of songwriting?
It's funny you asked that. It's about as subtle as a sledgehammer between your eyes. It's Yeah, I just decided to go with it. And that's one of the things I learned in the show. One of the mistakes, if you will, that I made is I didn't create a cohesive, singular musical world. It was kind of all over the place. Yeah.
Now, your original tagline was what really happened in Salem in 1692. Were you able to answer that question? And how did you answer that question?
Originally, I thought I was answering the question. I put forward a lot of the different, theories that were in place as to why it happened. And I had an ending at the end that really put a nice little bow on everything, and then brought honor to the people who lost their lives during the Salem Witch Trials. And so, no, I did not answer the question to people's satisfaction. What happened, I had one of the actors in the show, after we started rehearsals, my original ending had everyone singing the Lord's Prayer while the names of the people were said and that were executed. And I thought that'd be very satisfying for the audience and a nice closure to kind of a, catastrophic period of pre-U.S. history. And the actor came to me and said, is what you're saying with this ending is that if we could all just sing the Lord's Prayer, everything would have been fine? And I really gave thought to that. And so I put a whole different ending on it that was actually a twist ending. And it confused people. I don't know if I guess later in the interview I'll give a spoiler on that. But no, I did not give an adequate, solid, believable explanation.
Did you go with the period language, English language, or is it more of a contemporary look back at that period?
So the entire piece isn't period language. I do use excerpts from the historical record. There's not a lot, but there is some, and from the trials, and I incorporate those verbatim snippets where I can. My original idea was, if we are immersed in the era of 1692 as someone who's from 1692, the speech wouldn't sound period to us. It would sound contemporary because we were of that time. So my original idea was, I'm going to use, just regular U.S. vernacular because that's the way it would sound to people. I don't think that worked. That's one of the things I learned. Kind of got to stick to one or the other, or at least a middle ground. So the dialogue switches a lot between this, kind of more proper English to, some slang.
And as it is set in the 17th century, did that affect your approach to the style of music? I mean, you talk about different genres, but did you try and influence those genres with the music of the 17th century?
So I did. In parts, I emulated the music of Lully, which was, I believe before 1692, but the people of 1692 would have been familiar with his music. I also did some music in the style of Bach, which actually would have been, so Bach was 1685 to 1750, about, maybe 30 years later. And of course, the people wouldn't have been familiar with the music. I do one piece in particular that I think sounds very much like a recitative that would have been in like the St. Matthew Passion by Bach. It's a very short piece. And there's some interstitial music, underscore music that's very much like Lully. But other than that, recorder. I used a real recorder player in the soundtrack, and that to me, I thought a little bit of Puritans, of Shakers, of music of that period. But as a whole, no, the music is not 17th century.
Can you talk a little bit about Sondheim's rule where content dictates form and how you applied that to this work?
Content dictates form is one of Sondheim's axioms, and I have a deeper understanding of that every year as, my work grows and my experience continues. What I take that as, a lot of times when people start working on a musical theater project, what's first to their mind is, what's the style going to be? What's the style going to be? And there's a focus on that, when really what I've learned for me, the focus should be on what is it you want to say, and lyrically, how are you going to say that? And then the form of that will come out of the lyrical content. With Witches, this was all new to me. So a lot of times I would hear like a classical song that I liked, and I would think, oh, that style would work really good for a song like this. And then I would take that style and create a song for it. I don't think that's the most effective way. The songs that I wrote that way, I think, come across inauthentic. They're not as organic to the show, and I used the word jarring earlier. There's something in the audience experience that goes, what, something's not flowing here. So now I always know exactly what I want to say before I start working on the music style or the orchestration.
You touched on this a little earlier, but there are some transcripts still exist from the actual Salem Witch Trials. And you say that you accessed that. How much of that did you use? How much of this is historically based?
So I went through the complete witch trial transcripts and used everything that I thought was interesting and not repetitive. So particularly in Act 2, the actual trial sequence is where I have the most of the historical record back to back. Even though there's hip-hop music and a few gags, in the trial sequence, a lot of that verbiage is verbatim from the trials. There's not a complete record of the trials, but there is some, and I went through all of that in my research.
So obviously Arthur Miller wrote The Crucible, also based around the Salem Witch Trials. So does your story build on that work? And did you go down a similar route as Miller in terms of the romantic plot that he brought in between Abigail and John? So
no, my work doesn't take from or build at all on Arthur Miller's work on The Crucible. In fact, it was a rule for me not to watch The Crucible all the way through until after my show run, because I didn't want to accidentally take any elements. That was a mistake. I wish I had, because there's so much to learn from his work. So his romantic love affair between Abigail Williams and John Proctor was not part of the historical record. That was a dramatic device he put in. At the time, so Abigail Williams, I could have this wrong, I think she was around 12 years old, maybe a little younger, and Proctor was in his 40s.
Bit creepy.
Yeah, a little creepy, but Arthur Miller was so brilliant, like the person at the bar who said, oh, I would murder someone if they said something bad about me. Well, what do people do in an estranged love relationship? What limits will they go to? That was great that Arthur Miller, identified something that's part of our human experience, throughout the ages, and pulled in on that. He also had a great ending where John Proctor, dies, but he's a hero as he walks to his death. All of this I learned after the run of my show.
Spoiler alert on the Crucible for anyone that hasn't seen it.
Right.
So there are a lot of different theories regarding what the instigating events were around the Salem Witch Trials. So which theory did you decide to go with, and why did you select that particular theory against the others?
I went with all of them that had some traction to them and incorporated them. One of them that's maybe the most a little outside is that there was a contaminated wheat harvest that people were then making into bread, and that this was causing hallucinations with the girls as the start of it. That doesn't seem very plausible to me, but I did have it in as a subplot where a woman tells Tituba to bake a witch's cake, which is part of what they did in the historical record, but Tituba messes up the recipe. So I kind of allude to that. The other of course, Arthur Miller's love affair is not part of the historical record. The other theory is that it was the Putnam family was working with the minister on a so-called prayer list that was really people they had vengeances against. There was a lot of legal action back then of someone's cows died. Oh, someone cast a spell on it. There were property disputes. So people were using religion and witchcraft to settle these outside of court a little bit. The one other possible explanation of the witchcraft trials is one that I made up, and it is how I actually ended my show. People did not like it. I just watched the show again before this interview, and this ending came up, and I still love it. I think I'm the only one who loves it, but it's my own theory, and it's out there. So all of them. I used all of them.
So you used all of them and invented one at the same time.
And I ended up, the ending of the show was, oh, and all the ones you've heard that I've showed you, it's none of those. It's this made-up one over here.
So, Conrad, you did the premiere run of this show with a community theatre group, and bringing any new show to the stage is a massive challenge and undertaking. But how is that experience different when you're working with a community group as opposed to a professional theatre company?
So when I'm working on professional shows, I'm working in my music corner. You're working as a keyboardist or a, conductor or vocal director. And so everyone else is taking care of all their parts. When you're doing your own show in community theater, you are doing everything, not just the music, but you're preparing the scores, you're doing the marketing, you're working with people on sets, costumes, putting out the fires that always happen with creative personnel. So it's very, very time consuming. I usually split my day up. So half of it is creative, which is, working on the script, the orchestration, creating practice tracks. And the other half of my day is on, marketing and creating content in prep for the show to open.
As you did have already performed this with a community theatre group, do you think it is suitable and easy for other community theatre groups to perform this show or to produce the show?
No, and not because of the content, but the entire show, I programmed it in Ableton Live. So it was a pre-recorded soundtrack that then I triggered interactively with the cast. And the show needs a rewrite. So a future iteration of this would be with live musicians and a new edited version of the show. That, I think, many community theater groups would be able to handle just fine.
And what kind of audience did this show attract? Was it a historic audience? Or was it just your regular musical theater people?
There was a lot of people that were interested in the historical aspect. I had a lot of people contact me who were descendants of people that were involved in the trial, and even some people that were executed, and they came to see the show. A lot of people were interested in the American history aspect of it. I was surprised to learn this. Among the local legal scholars, attorneys, lawyers, I've heard that this was really kind of, the talk of the town for a couple of weeks, because there's so many historical legal aspects to this story. Back at this time, they still admitted spectral evidence, which is if someone sees a vision of someone doing something bad, then that person must have done that thing. So that's why these accusations were able to catch hold legally, is because they didn't have what we would consider actual proof. So a lot of the legal community was talking about these. And I also did have, I had 3 witches write me. They came to see the show. They left at intermission, and they said they were very offended at how I portrayed witches, which I found very interesting at the time. first of all, that's not a large demographic to appease.
True.
But what I found interesting is, there are no witches in Witches. I think we could agree that, there was not a real witch as far as what we think of, like, taking over people's bodies and these kinds of things during the Salem Witch Trials. So musical theater people, historical, legal, and 3 witches who walked out.
Who left?
Who left? Yeah.
So that's not an area where you would market the next production.
Bad demographic for me, yeah.
Is it true there was some confusion between your show and Wicked?
Just a little bit. So the title of my show, it said Witches with an exclamation point. And so there were a few people that bought tickets. I realized this was after the run, if you looked at it real quick, the exclamation point looks a little like a D. So I guess, you could think it was Wicked. There was someone I met before the show opened, and someone said, "Oh, are you going to see Conrad's show Witches?" And they said, "Oh no, I already saw that at the Fifth Avenue. It was okay. I don't want to see it again." And I remember, I heard them say this. I was like, oh my God, they're talking about Wicked. They think that I wrote Wicked. And on top of that, they already saw it and just said, yeah, it's okay. Yeah. And I'm like, it's Stephen Schwartz, one of the best musicals of all time. And I realized then, I'm obviously not going to satisfy everyone.
I have heard that you count your standing ovations at your shows. So how did Witches do? How many standing ovations did it get? And what was the audience response?
So Witches had a run of 10 shows. About, I think, 22 to 2,400 people saw the entire run. Out of those shows, 0 standing ovations.
Easy to count?
Yeah, easy to count. It just killed me. And in fact, my second musical, that was foremost on my mind, like, what did I do wrong? I need to get more standing ovations. And then my other shows did. Each one got more and more. I made a lot of changes after opening night, trying to get that standing ovation. What I realized after the run is the changes I was making, you know how they say you can't see the forest for the trees? The changes I was making to try to get the standing ovation was, looking at the limbs on trees rather than looking at the entire forest. And when you're in a run, especially, a short 3-week run like that, there's not enough time to have that that distance.
And you orchestrated the entire piece. So did the orchestration affect the composition, or did you compose and then just orchestrate?
The melodies were already written before I did the orchestration. The orchestrations were done to the melodies as we rehearsed.
So you mentioned Ableton. What other software do you use in writing musical theater, and how does that influence the creation process?
For the script, I started, like a lot of people do, in Word. Quickly realized that doesn't really work for scripts. And then I went to Scrivener. So the entire script was done in Scrivener. My process now is to compile notes in Evernote or Word, start my writing process in Scrivener because I like the way you can move things around, and then I move to Final Draft when it's getting towards the Final Draft, because Final Draft has a lot of report features that are very helpful, especially with props and tracking character arcs. For the sheet music, I use Sibelius. I've tried so many times to learn Finale. Even earlier this year, I spent a couple weeks diving into Finale. Just can't do it. Sibelius is so quick for me and so intuitive.
So Conrad, what are your favorite songs or song in the show?
One of my personal favorites is called Invisible Worlds. It's sung by Sarah Good to the Circle Girls. She's walked in and caught them doing fortune telling, which is forbidden and considered witchcraft. And she tells them her experience about the invisible world and being tempted to sign Satan's black book. This is all a reference to Cotton Mather's book, The Invisible Worlds. The belief system at the time was that there's this secondary spectral world around us that's, trying to control and tempt us. What I like about the song is it tells this complete story that's pretty dark within the one song. And I wish more of the songs that I did in Witches were like that, where it shares a complete story. Another song that I like, the song's not perfect, but I like it. It's the Circle Girl theme song, where they end with "The circle will not be broken." What I like about that song is it has that very kind of lighter conversational musical theater kind of sound to it. And in some ways, I wish that Witches was kind of more as a whole in the direction of one or the other of those, either more of the classical piece or more of the contemporary as far as the genre of the musical world. There's a lot of little elements that touch me in here, but those are the complete songs that I kind of enjoy.
And what about least favorite? Do you have one that you kind of like, I could skip over this?
There's a song called Witch's Examination. And it talks about, I didn't want to show a witch's examination, but I wanted to talk about what happens. Basically, these doctors who weren't really doctors would undress the women and inspect them head to toe, shave them, kind of open itself up for, some nefarious behavior. So this song, the doctor's describing to Tituba about what would happen if he did a witch's examination. The song is very campy and kind of cute. So one day in rehearsals, the actors playing Tituba and Dr. Griggs said, "We want to show you how we're interpreting this song." And they came up with this, to me, I was horrified. It was so dark and so disturbing, and Dr. Griggs was vicious with her, and it really bothered me. And I said to them, if that's the way you feel it, do it. What I really enjoyed is that these actors were taking the ball and adding their interpretation. So it's not my least favorite song, but it's very disturbing. I feel good that I respected their interpretation.
Right.
But yeah, when people see it, I hope it doesn't bother you too much.
And you mentioned earlier that a song that had been cut during the process. How many songs were cut? Did you cut a lot? And did you cut them because you didn't like them or they just didn't work?
There were, I love it, a very loaded question.
Yes.
So opening night with an extended intermission, the show was 3 hours. And what's the rule? No show should be over 2.5 hours unless it's Les Mis. So there had to be something cut. So we cut 2 pieces after opening night because Act 1 was over an hour and a half. One is called "Thankful for the Joy." I think it's a very beautiful song. It's the Reverend is having the girls do Bible study at his house, and they're very obedient and studying their scripture, and they sing a song, "Thankful for the Joy." I wanted something kind of like Simple Gifts, kind of a shaker kind of song. So it's in 3-part, written for female voices. Very beautiful. The reason it was cut is it is a beautiful song, but not an enjoyable experience for audience members sitting there for 2.5 minutes wanting something to happen.
Right.
So I think it would be a good piece by like a girls' choir. So that was one that was cut. The other song that was cut is called "I Will Always Be Here by Your Side." It was a song to show the relationship between Tituba and Betty Paris. Betty Paris was the actual daughter of the Reverend. Same house Abigail Williams lived in, but younger. Abigail Williams was like a cousin's daughter. The reason I like that song, it was also very contemporary musical theater. Showed the relationship between Tituba and Betty, and as I watched it today, there's a whole scene where a pivotal point happens because Tituba is sticking up for Betty, and without that song there, I can see how it'd be a little confusing for the audience. But as a song, it didn't really work either. So those two were cut. On the third day, I had more cuts, and the director and stage manager got really angry with me, and they go, no more changes, no more changes. And I acquiesced because I had to, and they were very angry.
Wise. You're a wise man, sir. So what have you been working on now since the premiere of Witches back in 2012, somewhat 9 years ago now?
After that, I started doing some cruise ship gigs. And then I did Pan, the musical, my second musical in 2013. I did Rock of Ages for 3 contracts with Norwegian Cruise Line, running between New York and Bermuda and the Virgin Islands. Really fun gig, a lot of work. I also worked as music director for Burn the Floor, which is an Australian contemporary ballroom dance show. And then in 2015, I brought Romeo and Juliet to the stage. It's all original music written to Shakespeare's lyrics. Then worked again with Cirque du Soleil on the world tour of Verikai as their keyboardist and music director. Then I took a couple years off to finish a master's degree in arts leadership and cultural management from Colorado State. And then in 2019 brought my 4th original musical to the stage called Pray the Gay Away, which is about the painful world of gay conversion therapy. And then COVID.
So not really that much then?
No, kind of watching TV and eating bonbons.
So you're putting the whole show out on the internet for free for people to watch. Why? What's in it for you? What are you getting out of that?
Well, first of all, to bring honor to the hard work of the people in the cast and on the production team, to share their work with everyone. It feels really good. I should have done this really a lot sooner. I'm also hoping that maybe there's someone out there who says, there's some kind of cool things here, and I like your later works. Would you be interested in doing, a rewrite of this? We would like to produce it. I would love to do a rewrite of this show. It would be substantially different, but I only work with a ticking clock. I need, to have those deadlines in order to do it. And if it's me setting deadlines for myself, I'm probably going to select another, newer work rather than go back.
Conrad, it's been an absolute pleasure. Friends, I hope you take some time to watch Witches the Musical online for free.
Yeah, it'll be on my YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, type Conrad Askland. If you're watching this video, you're probably already on my YouTube channel. And go down to my original musicals, and Witches will be there for you to watch.
Awesome. Thanks, Conrad.
Thank you, David.